Hello and welcome to season two, episode five of the My Life in Rugby interview series as we take a break from the Six Nations but fill the void with a really exciting interview. Our next guest is a former Munster out half who rose through the ranks from his time at Cork Con. However, after just 11 games in 3 seasons, he was forced into an early retirement on medical grounds at just 25. Join me to look back on his career in the game and a fruitful life after rugby, his former player and current coach and pundit, Jonny Holland. So welcome to the show, Johnny.
Thanks very much.
It's great to have you on. It's great to have guests of different backgrounds, but this is yet another guest of AIL distinction, I suppose. And we'll start on that lighter note because at the time recording, Con beat they're sitting second in Division 1A. They had a big win away at Trinity at the weekend. You happy enough how the season is going?
Yeah, we are. I mean, like, I think we've learned a lesson that, if you don't go in the top two, you can win it from top four, but if you don't get to the top two, it's getting more and more difficult. Like going up to Terranure last year, we knew they were obviously a very good team, and probably the form team, but we got a late win against them down in Cork and then went back up to Lakeland to take them on in the semi-final. And it's just very difficult with an away atmosphere or a home atmosphere for them. So you put yourself under pressure to get into the top two, and it's all so close up there as well that it's it's very interesting and pressurized. Like, but we are happy how we're going. But obviously, we know that we've probably left a few points out there, but they balance out across the season anyway, don't they? I'm sure most teams will think they left points out there at some stage. Even against us, I'm sure Trinity will think they left points out there last weekend. So we are happy where we're going and how we're building things, but how happy you are really comes down to how you finish, isn't it?
Suppose it does. And we'll kind of get into your time as a player in a moment, but the AIL, it feels like the competitiveness across the leagues, it has improved in recent years. It feels like it's arguably a better product, to use that term. From your vantage point, I know it's very concentric, but looking at the league as a whole, do you think it is in a better state than it was maybe 10 years ago or so?
10 years ago, I'm not sure to be honest, but I'll tell you that I think it's very competitive. Like it's more competitive than last season. So even at that much, Lansdowne had a bit of a dip last season, which I know they won't be proud of. So you can see that in their performances this year. Like they're fully back, and Ballyhinch fell just shy of it last year, and obviously they're at it again this year. And then the Cookies are at your Munster are sixth, aren't they? Which they won't be happy about because they were top four last year. So like you've already gone through six teams. Like when you talk about the top four plus Ballyhinch, who are very hard to beat, and your Munsters who beat everyone anyway. You've got like 6 out of the 10 there, and then you look at Trinity who are at the bottom, and they just shouldn't be. Like I said it to some of their players coming off the pitch last day, like they're not a bottom of the league team, because they're full of quality and well coached and everything else. So like it's so difficult. What a difficult league! Like you go to anyone and they can beat you, and you'd like to think you can beat everyone as well, which we have done, but we lost games as well. Like so, it's a ferociously physical and competitive league, which takes its toll on you when you're doing all the preparations and going week to week in the games. But that's what we love about it. It's very exciting, and the people that do follow it, they're shouting from the rooftops about it. It's a really good product, and the more people see that, I think the better rugby will be in Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like it has been pushed a little bit more in the last, maybe since COVID, which is good to see. The last couple of finals have been on TG Cahir and got decent attendances crowd wise, but also got a decent viewership as well. And that's what we need to see because it's a good product. And at the end of the day, if we're going to build rugby, there is more than just the international game to build up and the provincial game to build up as well. And so much about the AIL. And we spoke to Alex McHenry this season and Jack Carthy last season about it is helping players with the progression. I know Paddy McCarthy, for instance, was on the field the last day for Trinity. And his brother Joe got a great run for Trinity before his Ireland caps. But from your personal experience, bringing it back to when you were there, how much did it help your growth, especially in a position like 10 where minutes are just so important?
So important. I think like players need to play, and I'm not someone that goes on, out in the public and says like, give us all the players back and make them all play each week. I understand load management and player management, so I'm not going from that perspective. But as a player myself, you play better when you're consistently playing, and you can be rusty every second, third week, So when you're playing and you build momentum, I think you're better. When you aren't playing, you feel that as well, So I do think it's now. I know there's frustrations when people have to go back, I suppose, to the AL and not play the games that they want to be playing with their province or otherwise. So I do understand both sides of it, but I just think, like, from my perspective, my development from UCC through to Cork, you play a lot of games in the academy at the time. Now I speak from my experience, and not to say anything poorly about those systems like that. We learned a lot of our skills, and you do go to senior games, and you're learning the landscape of rugby. But as an out half, you're not learning how to control the game each week. And when you get into an A game, leading into potential senior games, then you do feel like you progress. But if you're not kicking corners or kicking a post under pressure in the league each week, then you're definitely losing out. So I think, thankfully, the product is better. There's a lot more streaming. There's more eyes on the game. But also, I think there's been a change in terms of how the provinces are dealing with players going back to play in the league. I think they do value it. So I understand when they're having to manage their load, and the load is going higher and higher. But when there are games available, particularly from my perspective, I deal at Munster, I suppose, and they're very encouraging around game time, and players are available. When they're available, they're with you, and that's great to see, because it does bring the level of the whole AIL up. Like, we know that, like, a top two, top four clash in the AIL is ferocious, and there's a lot to be learned in that. It's not just that a provincial player comes back and they stand out all the time. They don't. Like, you'd like to think they do most of the time, but they can be outplayed by anyone in that league at times. So it is a very good product, and we do get to benefit from it.
Absolutely. And like, as you said, it is, players come back to the provinces, and a lot of players have been the same. They wanted the minutes. Like, when I spoke to Alex, he was saying he just wants to play. Like, he just wants to play. And some lads are like that. And then I know, Jack Harty, when he was at Buccaneers, he led them on a promotion charge. And like, as he said, 10 and kind of managing a game, it's as important to know how to just see a game out, or just to win a game. We see it in the Six Nations, even at the highest level, just knowing how to feel your way through it and to get through it. And I suppose, like, as I said, at 10, it was probably crucial for you that you had this bank of experience before you even made it to Munster, and even just playing Munster A games and so on, just to have something to rely upon.
Yeah, absolutely. But even with Alex, when he's coming back to us, like, I can double down on that. He did want to play rugby all the time, and if he wasn't selected with Con, which happened rarely, but it did happen, he wasn't happy. Like, it wasn't just they can do what they want. They'll be gone on at Munster, or I can go back to training on Monday morning. That's not the case. Like, because he knew that he had to get his defensive reads right and his timing right, and conditioning, playing the game. You can condition all you want, and you can do top ups after training and everything else, but you have to be making tackles and hitting rucks, and everyone feels that. You could go through the whole preseason on contact, and the minute the contact comes in, it's like you've never done a preseason. It's the same in season with matches. So he was unbelievable for coming back with a good mind, and fitting into the system seamlessly. And I think we all needed that when we were playing. You just need games, and you need to be playing more consistently. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good that we have a competitive league there for players to come back into. Like, that's ultimately a sign of a good system that's there. But a part of the AIL lore is the kind of feel good factor as well. And we did talk about this with Alex earlier in the season. So if there is any stories or anything like that you want to maybe throw out there to just kind of talk about it, because I know we went down that kind of more naturally, but it is part of the fun. And as a coach, I suppose those away days and things like that are probably important for young players, but also when you were young, the fact that you're heading off to Ballinhinch, or you're heading to Dublin or whatever. Is there any standout memories from your time as a player or as a coach?
I remember coming back from, I think it was Ballymena. I was at UCC. We played 1B. We didn't realise we actually had to win with a bonus point in the last game. I think Paddy Jackson played the same day. I don't know who else was with Ballymena, but we had to get a bonus point. I don't think we realised, which I only said to someone the other day, a bit poor not to realise, wasn't it? But
Yeah.
we got it anyway, and we stayed up, and we had a long bus trip home, and a few lads were drug tested before we got home. So we had a good bit of time on the bus, even waiting around. We were finishing the clubhouse and we were waiting to go. So it was a long, long trip down. And they're the trips that, you speak about in the AL. Like, you don't want to go to the north too many times, just because it's all it's players, they're amateurs, it's their spare time that they're playing for a hobby. So going away for a long weekend is difficult sometimes at home. But you do remember those times too. When you get an away win on the road, and you have a long trip home, and you're with the lads that you've played with, there can be good times had along the way down. And you stop off in certain pubs on the way down, and like that. I still remember that trip down from Ballymena. That was a good few years back now. But we do it definitely once a year. We've two this year, so you'll always remember those trips. But you'll remember different trips for different reasons. And the AIL, there's characters around the AIL like this, need to be known to people. Maybe they don't at times, but there's a lot of characters, a lot of good rugby people around the clubs, like. and they keep the whole thing alive. Like there's a lot of volunteers in every club, and most stories will be about them. I know the Energy Ariel podcast goes on the road, and those lads will try and uncover their characters, like but they're in every club. They're in every
Yeah.
club. We have enough of them, and they're around everywhere. So I think there's plenty of stories to be told, but maybe not from me to not from me to the wider public. But no, the long bus trips, plenty of points if that's what you're into, and. And these days, I let the lads go off in a different direction. I go home and and keep my family life somewhat balanced. But yeah, I let them to their devices these days.
Yeah, might be better off in some regard, especially with the state that some of them end up in. I know Alex told a story about spraying champagne around the streets of Dublin, and as much as I thought that's different, it's probably not the first or the last person to do it either in different places as well. Because
I, I'm out of touch now with the current stories. Maybe like I said, I leave them at it and I leave them tell their own stories. I don't want to get involved in that anymore.
fair enough, you don't want to be dropped either by telling the coach a story and then not being too happy either, I suppose. But
Don't worry, you're allowed to be yourself most places, aren't you? So I don't mind if they have stories to tell once they don't get themselves in too much trouble.
that's good as well. But we'll move on to Munster as well, because that's where most people would recognise you from. That's where you rose to prominence, made your debut 2013. Now it's hard to believe it's that long ago, but like it was a slow start to life. You only had one start across your first two seasons, but I suppose what was the first few years like with the academy and with the senior side? Because ultimately, like there was a couple of injuries in there, and there was a lot of depth in there when you were a 10.
Yeah, like there's possibly a lot of frustration around those years. A lot of doubt, self-doubt, overriding doubt around whether it's the right decision, whether you can keep going because I think around that time, maybe it's a little bit different now. It's getting small bit younger, but not even like, people are pounding at the door all like for a couple of seasons now still. But your friends are starting to go through college as well, and they're coming out the other side of it getting real jobs, and you're still trying to become this professional athlete. So I think like it was my first start in 2013. I finished college in 2013. So like that's exactly what I'm talking about. People are going on to be, trainee accountants, and they're starting to make a bit of money, and you're still grafting away. And I suppose the conversation happens at home as well that, is this the right thing to do? Can you keep going like this? And I think most of the time the answer is yes. And you love if someone doubted you because you think you can actually get on and do it, but you don't know yourself. So there's a little bit of that involved in the formative years, but it's all very, very worth it when you can make a little breakthrough. Because you can't replace it. I'll tell you now, like the conversation will go on, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a small bit. But the further I am away from it, the more I know you can't replace it. And your intention isn't to replace it. Like once you're out of it, you're out of it. You won't replace it. It's not going to be the same. So if you go chasing that, it's going to be a long life. But it's very, very hard to get the same feeling back of running out in Thomond Park or the Aviva or elsewhere. And all eyes are on you. The whole week is built up to that. Every conversation you have, whether you like it or not, is going to be about that. And it's a special place to be. So like when you do break through that mold and get through the frustrating years, they're there on purpose. Like even my time in the sub academy and the academy, it's the NTS or the PTS now, and into a full academy after that. They're there to weed people out, see who's strong enough to get through it, and see if they can develop from a rugby perspective first, but also from a commitment, from a self-awareness, self-doubt, confidence level. Can they get through and actually break through into the real game? And it is the real game after that. It's very different from getting into the academy, doing a gym session at 7 o'clock, doing a bit of skills, going home for your lunch, maybe doing a bit of kicking in the afternoon. It's very, very different in a real full setup where the pressure is on every day, analysis on you every day. And I'd always say it's worth it. You can't replace it, but it can be quite tough at the start, and people don't realize that. They think you're just going to get a massage or going to throw a ball around. You're going for a massage and you don't want to because it's a drive away and you could be doing something else, and you don't know if you're good enough to be doing all these things. But absolutely, I'll come back to the fact that it's all worth it most of the time. And
Yeah, I suppose. And like it's weird how your time at Munster unfolded, because nearly half of the games you played were in the back end of 2015, 2016 season. And I suppose some of that is just the way of life and the way of injuries and everything. But just because you mentioned it there, do you remember much of that season? I know it wasn't a fruitful one for Munster, but just from your own perspective of finally getting on the field after basically being injured for most of the season before.
I remember it vividly enough, and I suppose because it was the end, I remember it all, and people still talk to me about it, which is funny, like, you know. But before that, like, I think I had my first start in Thomond Park. I got a dunt on the shoulder, and I went off, and then you know you have to go back into your A games and get another opportunity, and you get one or two. Like I remember laughing with, or maybe at myself with Simon Mannix. Like the first game I came on was Cardiff away, and I came on for 10 minutes, but I didn't touch the ball because we defended for most of it. I can't remember if we won or lost. I think we won, but we were defending. And I came on the next week against Connacht for like 2 minutes, but I got to kick the ball to touch, but not in play. So that's what he was laughing with me or at me. So it does take a while. Like, you know, you see these people breaking through and you don't realize, you know, what actually goes into that and the frustrations. And obviously I tore my hamstring off the bone fairly nicely in the time in between. So like I had 13 months out of the game. And then from that, you're trying to build yourself back up. And I played a development game over in Musgrave Park against the Irish under 20s. And I think was I 24 at that stage, and young fellas were saying who's the older lad playing 10. Like, you know, that was the way it was. You were past it at that stage at 24. So like my career probably only started to kick off and then it was done because I went from that development game into an A game. I think either in Leeds or up in Christians, and then or the other way around. I think we went up to Leeds Carnegie, if that's what they were still called, and we were they called that, and it was a sandy pitch, so I was sore from that. And then we went up to Christians, and it was bogged like Musgrave Park was, and I was sore from that. But I had an excuse for it, and then I went through a run of games, you know. So we played Dragons in Thomond Park. I think I played against Zebra, played against Dragons, and then we went up to Connacht, and I got a bit of backing from Axel, to be fair to him, leading into the Leinster game, and then we had Edinburgh in Musgrave Park, which was class because it's only a couple of minutes over the road from my home house and where I am now actually as well. And the Scarlets away in Thomond Park finished the season. I didn't play particularly well that game, to be fair, and I just thought I'd get back into preseason, get my leg together, get a bit of a break. I came back in the middle of the season. You're obviously not conditioned, and there was a whole load of different factors going on. But unfortunately, that was the end of it. But I remember quite a lot around the actual maybe 6 game run in between that. Getting a nod from Axel, getting up to the Aviva, even Connacht away, we got a bit of a beating. But I had a few moments that I was quite proud of, you know, getting a bit of a line break offload to Zebo, he scored, and you still remember those bits and pieces that you tell yourself that you were actually good enough to be there, but unfortunately it wasn't long enough.
I was at that Connacht game. It was the year Connacht went on to win the league, and I still felt, you know, maybe it was naivety because the season wasn't going well. But I was like, oh, we'll be the ones to take them down. And
Yeah,
ultimately, it came down to that Scarlets game needing to win to get into Europe because
yeah,
so the season goes. But that's just the way it is, I suppose. Because I know, like looking back, Tyler Blendal spent a lot of that season injured as well, for instance, and he was in the squad there. But I do want to touch on that really quickly before the injury because Ian Keatley was in the 10 group, Tyler Blendal and yourself. You're coaching AIL level. Ian Keatley is with, I think he's at AIL as well as with the Ireland under 20s, and Tyler Blendal is the Hurricanes coach. Like, what would those lads like to share? I know it's not an actual room like in NFL, but to share a dressing room with, because for 3 lads from the same group to all go into coaching, there must be something in that.
I think it's just a position that comes with it, isn't it? Like you're supposed to be a general on the pitch, and you're supposed to be thinking about the game through different people's eyes, anyways, in out half. You know, whereas I think good players around the pitch will do that anyway, but not everyone does that. You know, your tight head prop wants to look at the scrum and go forward, hopefully. You know, so and the way the game is developing, they're doing a lot more now, obviously. But you know, tens, maybe nines get a good kind of view on how the whole game works. But as a coach, you have to zoom out even further and see how the game runs above people. You know, so I think it is a good kind of starting point in the coaching about understanding different parts of the game. So that's probably why we all went into it. But you know, those lads were great, and fortunately, I think for me, I was injured at different times to Tyler, so I never fully competed with him because I already felt like a bit of a coach's favourite, but for good reasons. I don't say that spitefully. He was his knowledge was unbelievable. I always said when he was injured and I was sitting as a player who was possibly even playing that weekend, he was the one up the front with his notebook out, telling us how the game plan should work. You know, maybe that was when I thought I wasn't retired yet and it was pre-season under Razzie. I can't remember, but I remember him doing it and feeling like, Jesus, this guy is really the starter, isn't it? And it might not be me. Because his knowledge was huge, like he was so good. And I remember saying he's going to be a coach and a very good one as well if it doesn't work out for him. And you can see that already. Like he's been with Tonga at international level, hasn't he? And
Yeah.
the Hurricanes now. So like he's obviously gone on to a good level of coaching fairly quickly. But I'm not surprised by that. But like even with Keats, like Keats was very good to compete with. Even when I was trying to compete with him, he would have been giving me tips around my kick in, and I remember a certain lunge that I had into the ball, and he was like, "You can't be doing that lunge, like it's taking your power away," and he was coaching me through that. So those, like, I'm not surprised that they're coaching because they were thinking about the game all the time anyway. Um, and Keats was more lighthearted, definitely. Like he's still a bit of messing in him, I'd say. But yeah, it's funny. I think it just comes with the territory of the position. You'll get people as a 9 or a 10 that are just interested in the game, and I didn't even think I would coach, to be honest. I didn't think it was for me, but I probably felt like I had unfinished business to a degree and just fell into it a small bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a few friends who've played for Bows in recent years, or one or two actually playing for Bows this season, and they do rave about Ian Keatley as a coach and as a kind of a person as well. And there is that element. And I know when Tyler retired, that was one of the things that was coming out of Munster. It's like, don't be surprised if he goes into coaching. And it's eventually what happens in the dressing room, 7 days a week will probably end up happening down the line as well. I suppose that is kind of an element to it. But just to go back to the injury, because it is kind of a main talking point, unfortunately. Like he missed, I think he said 13 months. It's obviously really tough, but just during that 2015-16 season, when you did get a run of games, did you ever have a concern that this injury will come back to bite you? Was that something that was on your mind, or how was that kind of period of coming back like when you had a long-term injury?
I probably had a big doubt at some stage in the middle of the rehab. I remember saying to Chloe, my wife, what happens if I'm going to have to retire? And I remember she was kind of like, Jesus, don't say that. Don't mention that word. And why are you even talking about that? We didn't actually believe that I was going to be retiring, Um, and it was probably just one of those days where I had a lot of doubt and I was saying, I could retire from this thing. Like, what if it doesn't work out? We probably spoke about it for 30 seconds. Like, that's as much doubt as I had. And then when I went back, I probably didn't really deal with what was happening at the time because I had a bad tendinopathy in my tendon. I thought they were all attached. It turns out they weren't. So no wonder I did. It all makes sense after the fact. But even with the physios, like who worked very, very closely with me, um, under Colin Coakley initially, with Keith Thornhill would have been going through a lot of what I was doing in my return to play, and it was kind of like a case of let's keep our heads down. You're getting a game, just get on with it, and we'll deal with that afterwards. And that's possibly how we went with it. But even to the point where, like I said to you, I just thought, I was completely blind to the fact that I would retire because I said, and I would have said it to Chloe, like, no, just get through. I know it's sore. Like Aled Walters was there, and I remember we were in Musgrave Park here before the Edinburgh game, and I nearly pulled out of the game. I just couldn't warm up my tendon. I just couldn't get my hamstring going, and it took me a half an hour, I'd say. But he was like, go away and do another warm up. Just take your time, do another one, and just see if you can get going. And I got going, and I did, and I played the game, and I thought I played a decent game that day. But I actually didn't train against them. No, sorry, I did train once in the lead up to Scarlets, but I was getting sorer and sorer after every game. Like, and after that Edinburgh game, we were week on week. So the Tuesday, me and Keats were told we shouldn't train, but Axel was like, "Well, one of you has to, because I can't train without a 10." So unfortunately, I was the one that had to train. But I think I didn't train on the Thursday. I didn't kick all week, and I might as well not kicked in the game either because I was fairly ropey off the tee. Um, and then that was the last one, but I didn't think it was going to be my last one. I knew I struggled. I missed. It was just a really poor game. I missed 3 tackles on Hadley Parks, which were just straight on. I know he's a big player, but like,
There's no shame to that, to be honest. Like,
no shame in that. But I would have been annoyed by it. I didn't kick well off. Like it was one of those days where you're kicking the tee and not you're nearly looking up to see where it went. I actually said to someone the other day, only I soloed the ball in my last game, like in Thomond Park along the 22. I went to clear it and I probably wasn't organised enough. Then pulled out of it, soloed it by mistake, offloaded to Francis Eiley. He knocked it on, and I was like, "What am I actually doing?" Like, so I survived a lot longer in that game than I thought I should have. But like, I went to um, Kim, my sister-in-law, Chloe's sister's birthday party that night, and I just in the season, dust yourself off. I wasn't too worried about anything, and I just thought I'd go away on holidays, get myself back, do a pre-season, get my proper contract, and kick on as a rugby player. And it was actually funny you mentioned Keats because we were in pre-season and Razzie had come in that year, so then things changed. The sessions got heavier, the days got longer, and I just couldn't keep up with the load on my hamstring, which makes sense now, but it didn't at the time. And one of the training sessions, maybe 4 or 5 weeks in, um, we were playing, and I think I had a pass the ball in the deck, and Keats intercepted it or picked it up off the ground, and I just remember thinking he's not getting through anyway. There's no way he can score a try on my watch. So I went to get after him, and I tightened my hamstring to such a low level I couldn't even say I strained it, but I tightened it definitely. So they told me I had to take a week off and rehab that. So when I was coming back on the pitch, I did a fitness test the following week, and longest story short, I did the fitness test and they were like, yeah, that's fine. So I went back to my normal level of hamstring soreness, not the strain. And I remember frustratingly saying, I think it was to PJ Wilson, who's in, is he with Cardiff now? He was with Bath for a while as well, but PJ's brilliant. I remember saying to him, am I going to address the real elephant in the room here? What's going on? Like, am I going to tell you what's really going on with my hamstring? And maybe it just came all out in a bit of a frustration, but he said, yeah, go and speak to the physios, tell them what's going on. And I remember having a really tough moment on the pitch. Donegal Ryan was there around the kit van. He was injured at the time. And I half broke down, to be honest. I was like, I have to deal with this. And I probably knew somewhere within my head, but I was just, that conversation I said with the physios earlier on, just keep the head down and say nothing kind of a thing. It's all starting to work out now, but it really wasn't, like, so that was the beginning of the end. I had a bit of, got some scans done and spoke to different specialists, but we didn't really know what was going on in my hamstring. It was game over from that stage.
Do you think an element of that kind of, you could say it's just wanting to train and all that, and it is, but do you think some of it is just a case of, well, as a rugby player, you're going to be hurt to some small degree? Do you think that's all it was that was kind of stopping you from going to the physio, just thinking, well, I'm going to be sore in some regard?
I think it was just the nature of my injury too. Like, tendons are funny, and they do get cranky, So like, if you overload a tendon, it gets sore. If you underload a tendon, it gets sore. It's just a really awkward injury. And I suppose because we didn't know the real mechanics of mine, and that a lot of it wasn't attached, or some of them weren't attached, that it just felt like a tendinopathy that wasn't really a big risk. So it wasn't that I didn't speak to people about it. Like, I would have been quite open with a bit of pain. I might have hid some, but I was quite open actually about how I was, and the physios would have been trying to read between the lines there, and like, yeah, we need to offload him here, build it back up. But I had done the whole thing of like, I went back to preseason the year earlier, and I was like, I'm good to go, and they were like, you're not, and I was like, I'm doing a full preseason, and they said you're not doing day one even. So I had to go back to baseline and build back up again. That took a couple of months, so I was really really frustrated in the middle of it. And there was probably a couple of those moments, but so like, there was a part of it going, why is my tendon sore and why can't I do these things? But like, I could sprint full out and I could play all the time, but it was just deteriorating week on week to the point where, like, I did retire. I went playing like five-a-side with my own friends, and I was deteriorating in five-a-side as well. Like, so it was like, it just got sore and sore once a week. I could barely move by the end of it. So it obviously was the right decision. But even now, like, I might do something less so really these days because my knee gets a bit sore. But like, I might do something and I feel really good, and I'd need a bit of pain at times to feel like you made the right decision. Like, you weren't making it up. A small bit of pain isn't bad for you, but yeah, it definitely was something I had to address at that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. But how does that kind of discussion, the idea of going to specialists, how does that come about? Does that kind of start with the physio, and like, ultimately you retired in September, which is so close to the start of the season. So like, there was the discussions going through the duration of preseason, or how does that work?
Yeah, they were really, like, I suppose we were, well, maybe the middle of preseason we started the discussion. Like, I knew I was retiring from the middle of August, which you have to wait for a report to come back from the specialist, and I'd seen a second specialist, so obviously that was probably the start of August, and the 1 week hamstring strain was probably the middle of July. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so I probably knew from the middle of July that I was on uh, a hiding to nothing, or I knew I was at the start of something. And when I saw the first specialist, it was a case of, well, if this is a new injury, you're probably okay. But if this is coming from the old injury, you're in big, big trouble. Like, and that's how the conversation went. So I think he rang me, and I just knew, So he was like, my advice is to find a different career, basically. And obviously, you're not going to listen to the first fella that tells you that. So we went and found someone else, and he told me the same thing in a different way, different mechanism, but same outcome. So you can go and find more and more specialists if you want to. Maybe someone will give you something that you can cling on to, but at the end of the day, you're clinging on to it, and it wasn't. So it does start with the physio, and it escalates from there through specialists and consultants. And unfortunately, at that stage, it's out of your hands then.
It strikes me as being a short time frame. Like, you probably get the first proper tweak in July. You kind of have the decision made by mid-August. Like, you're still close to the start of the season. Like, was it then? Obviously, it wasn't a major shock over by the end of the month when it's finally announced. But is it kind of a shock to the system, the fact that it's like, well, I'm essentially on borrowed time now at this stage?
Well, I thought I was a starting Munster at half, or at least I finished the season before like that. I know nothing is guaranteed, so that's why I said, like, I thought I'd put in a good performance from September until mid-October, hopefully catch a bit of an eye and go and negotiate my next contract pre-Christmas. Like, that's genuinely what I was thinking. it was a very fast turnaround, especially for people around me, I would say, because they probably wouldn't know the day to day,
Yeah.
me being sore and the conversations I have with the physios, and then you come home like, do you really want to talk about that again, or cause people any concern? So like, I think that's possibly the hardest part of the whole thing, is having to feel like you're leaving people down around you. Like Chloe wouldn't have felt like I was leaving her down. She probably felt like I've been put out of my misery at the best of times anyway. But certainly my family, like I just thought, you know, they went through the whole thing with me as well, and they would have gotten a lot out of the half season before that. Finally, he's getting somewhere, and finally we can shout from the rooftops, and then you feel like you're kind of letting people down as well. So there's a lot goes into it. There's a massive psychological blow to retirement like that. But like I think we were all quite realistic about it, and I think I was anyway, but it was horribly short as a turnaround, considering, I just finished the season before. I'd say people don't understand how I retired after. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of conversations where people say, sure, didn't he play in the Scarlets game at the end of last season? What happened between then and now? Like, so
Yeah.
I'm very aware of that, and also being so close to starting a new season under a kind of a very exciting time in Munster, new HPC, new coaches like Razzie and Jack, different way of doing things. And I was turning the car around. I had actually just moved to Limerick, because of the HPC. So I spent a couple of weeks there and decided this isn't good enough. I'm going to turn the car around. So it was very sudden. It was very sudden. Even like telling my own friends, I felt was a hard part of it. I said my own friends, like my close group at home, my my first WhatsApp group. It's I remember telling them and pulling out of the house I was renting in with Darren O'Shea and Francis Ely, and fucking I cried the whole way home. Like genuinely, it
Yeah.
was a really hard thing to do. And it was more so the reality of it. It was done then, So like that was, I was still waiting on a report and all the rest of it, but we all knew that it was done, and that was hard.
Yeah, it must be, because you are like only 25, 26 years of age at the time. It's not like you're, 10-year veteran at this stage and you've kind of done it all and you've seen it all. Like, it's no one your own age would be kind of retiring, or at least it's very rare. It's, a dime a dozen kind of scenario. But just because that season is obviously well known in Munster circles, like that was the year that Axel passed, and he would have done a lot of work with the academy around the time that you were kind of coming through. What was Anthony Foley's impact on you? And you can go whichever way you want with the conversation. I understand it's very personal, but what was his impact on you?
He actually had a lot more of an impact than I would have thought at the time. There was a game that I didn't know how much it stood for. It was an A game away at Esher, I think, in the UK, and for some reason he brought me. He brought all the academy around the time of like Killer, Dave Foley, Sean Henry, that Bowes group, and the rest. Like I don't know, was Tommy O'Donnell around there? A lot of good players. And I was brought. I said, what's going on here? But I went. So I was driving a family car. I parked across the road from UL. I didn't know where to go. Like I should have driven into UL, but I was like, you can't park in there. So I was all over the place. I felt like I was so young. And he gave me a shot to go away, like a plane over to the UK to play a game with fellas I don't know, like who were all kind of pros or getting to be pros, and a lot of them were afterwards. So I was completely out of my depth. But he started that, and even I'd hurt my shoulders when I was playing at UCC, and Axel made sure that I got into the Munster physios, Colm Coakley at the time as well, who dealt with my hamstring initially when I was a senior player. Um, and I remember him telling me, like, Axel wants me to see you, so you must be up to something. And so that's probably, I didn't realize what he was doing in the background for a while for me. And that would have kind of gone into calling me up to senior sessions, and that's all an opportunity for people to see you, and the people that are doing the academy contracts, for them to know that you're around. So there was a lot of foundations done around Axel's time in the academy, but then it all came full circle when he gave me the nod ahead of Keats, and it was one thing playing the Zebra game at home and all that, but he gave me the Leinster game, and that was the one. That was the one that people thought, right, he is the starting 10. No, you're not the starting 10 forever, so I'm not saying like that was my career, but I think that was a game where he didn't have to do that. It would be easy and a very easy conversation to go with the senior player, but he said, "Fuck it, this guy is the one." And you'll never forget that, like, and it it was a very weird situation when I was gone from Munster, and unfortunately Axel was gone from the rest of us. It was like you talk about quick turnarounds. That was a weird one.
Yeah. Do you kind of still remember that weekend, like the impact? Because I know all Munster fans kind of remember where they were, unfortunately, and like that entire week and the Munster community coming together was fitting for the man in particular. But do you kind of remember that week and that weekend prior, and I suppose the kind of, did you come together kind of as squads and as players to talk about Axel?
Unfortunately, I was elsewhere. I was on the piss, so I was actually having to go into Newcastle. My one of my good friends in college in Sunderland, and John Egan, who we had grown up with, was playing with Brentford, I think at the time, up in Newcastle. So we made a weekend of it. And I remember the Sunday after 2 heavy days, 2 heavily controlled days, but we had 2 good days of it. And Rory Scannell rang me, and my reaction wasn't great. I was so far away, and we were obviously fairly hungover. And I remember texting him back and like, "Geez, I'm sorry there. I was, I was a world away there when you were telling me, because the senior players, and Rory was in a really good place at the time, a very young senior player, had to do a bit of divvying out of like telling people that were close to the squad. But I just retired in September, like you said, and I think it was that October, in October or
Yeah.
something. So I was still around the squad a bit, and I remember going back up to them for the funeral and the Glasgow game and all the rest of it. So like there was a good closeness there, but I was obviously a little bit detached from it, not being there all the time. But I do remember it quite vividly because I regretted my reaction to it every day for the rest of the time until now. And I also regretted. I said it to Chloe a few times. I never really thanked Axel for what he did for me. Like, and that was a massive regret as well. That you need to understand that you have to thank the people that do things for you. And he was a big one that, he, I think there was an interview when I played this every game. I didn't see it, and people were telling me that he was saying, this fella's playing with a smile on his face, and I was probably faking half of it, but I was enjoying myself, and he was the reason why. And and you don't know when the last time is that you speak to a person. So I was like, geez, I really should have thanked him, and that was a regret. But like, obviously, I wasn't going to thank him at the time. But I didn't speak to him from my after my retirement. I probably should have had a good conversation with him around what he had done for me, and I didn't do that, and that was a big regret for me as well.
Suppose hindsight is 2020 and all that, because
Yeah,
like it is a shock, and that's the reality of life in some ways. But that there was ultimately like that Munster group came together, and their season is a different story. That maybe if one of the players from that group was on, we talk about that. But just really quickly, you worked with Razzie Erasmus and Jack Nina for a very short time. Felix Jones, Jerry Flannery also were at Munster at the time. Like, I know we talked about with Tyler Blendal and Ian Keatley as well, but there was some amount of rugby intellect in the HPC at the time, wasn't there?
as it turns out, and Razzie seemed special, all right, like in one sense, but you didn't really know. I didn't know what he was going to go on to. I didn't know much about him before that. So
Yeah.
like, but you knew when you were talking to them, like Jack was and is a guy that just captures the imagination, like a very South African personable way about them, like and they've continued that. So like um we still speak in Cork on, especially when Duncan was coaching with me last year. Like, we'd speak a lot about what Jack would do and his ways around the defense and everything else. And I retired under Razzie. Like, I knew the man 6 or 8 weeks, and he was dealing with a
Uh,
very sensitive topic with me. So, and he had retired through injury and everything. So like there was a closeness there, all right. But I was sorry that I didn't get to spend more time around that environment. The HPC was new. I was going up there for a bit afterwards, maybe clinging on to the whole thing too. But I had reasons to be up there in my head at least, and being around the nice setup and everything. But um, yeah, you don't realize like the Felix and Jerry Flannery were going to go on to the things that they're going on to as well. But it's underpinned massively by work ethic. Like, if you look at Felix, I know the story's going out as well that his laptop is full. That he just got so much rugby on his laptop. He's insane. Like, he's absolutely insane. I spoke to him a bit after my retirement, right? But and like I think they had a baby on the way. He was renovating a house, which was an old castle of some form, like in Limerick, and he was just taking on project after project, and I'd say he was up half the night. But like, I don't, he's probably doing that the same thing with his rugby, and Vla's another fella who's just so invested, and it doesn't surprise you when people like that are successful.
yeah, you do need to have that kind of ability to find the extra 10-15%. Like, and it's such a cliche, but it is so true. And like every time, like I know when Alex McHenry spoke about Felix, he's like, what you see, not what you see isn't what you get, but there is that element. Like, everyone thinks he's soft spoken and, kind of, he is just a rugby nerd and a great coach because of it. Like, and
He's
that's a
not that
great sign.
he's not that softly spoken. He's absolutely insane. No, but he's so invested, and he's actually like defense coach sitting in the stands now in England. He's going to look very serious. He's great crack. Um, but he's. I remember when I retired, when I came back from my injury after my retirement, or sorry, before my retirement, he was after retiring with his neck, and I felt really guilty about it for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know what came into my mind, but I just thought he gives everything to every session. And I actually had this kind of mantra myself that like, what would Felix do if he was in my position? Because I remember thinking when I got back, I was splashing in puddles, running through wet ground, and lads were kind of jogging in from the HPC, kind of curling up, like not really wanting to train in the wet. And I remember thinking I took so much of that for granted, like, and I don't know when I kind of fell into this thing, like, oh, you get to do it again, whereas Felix doesn't, and I felt really bad for him. So I remember thinking, like, anytime I struggled, or I used to write a lot of notes at the time, with a lot of journals and things, and I would always write down what would Felix do. He'd wake up in the morning and go hammer and tongs for the day with everything he could do to get better, like, so that kind of molded my return from injury as well. Little does he actually know about it, but it did mold what I did afterwards.
It's testament to himself and to Jack and Razzie and Jerry and Axel and the likes, that a lot of interviews that you do with kind of your age group of players or anyone who was around Munster at the time speak so highly of them, and you do wish them further success. There is a slight element with Felix that you wish him further success outside the Six Nations, maybe in the autumn or whatever. But,
not this year. Maybe some other.
We'll kind of cross that bridge when we come to it in a few weeks' time. But just to kind of wrap up on the injury talk, and it's been great to kind of get you to open about it, because a lot of people wouldn't know. But like, you obviously, as you said, you did a degree in the bag and all that. So how important were Munster, and I know there's pathways involved now with the IRFU system, for getting players like yourself adjusted to life after rugby so quickly? Because again, it is that major shock to the system.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a hard thing because like I was offered maybe services and someone to talk to and all that kind of stuff when I'm probably still like that, and I deal with it myself, kind of a thing. Or I suppose I'm quite open in terms of how I answer any questions or how I speak about things. Like I don't think I hide a whole lot, but like I would also try and internalize a few things. So like I didn't do it at the time, but I would have spoken to my family and Chloe quite a bit. And then going on to like the kind of professional side of things, maybe I don't remember fully, but like the IRUPA was the Players Association at the time, and there are definitely things you can lean on. But Dervla Work was with IRUPA at that time, and I would have spoken to her a lot in my kind of academy time, and after I retired, I remember meeting her. So there was definitely conversations had, and meeting Claire Cook over in the office and everything else. But one thing about whether Munster were the crowd that helped me through or what, but rugby helped me through because, Cork On were so good to me that, I'm still there, obviously. And that's how that worked. Like, you'd be, and I know I'm longer in the tooth now as well, that I know that they're helping people because it's mutually beneficial, but at the same time, they're still helping you, so they obviously wanted a coach, and I wanted a life outside of rugby, which didn't really work because they dragged me back into rugby, but like they helped me to get a job. When I retired, I was doing a postgrad in nutrition, and I just came from a meeting in Cork On, and it's all the same people, like, besides Jerry Holland, unfortunately, but all the same people helping you through. It was Jerry that got me on the phone to commit to coaching with the under 20s when I thought I was pulling out of it, and I said, no, I'm going to go. He said, can you do more? And I said, I'm going to do less. He was like, don't do less. So it's funny how things come around, and definitely the rugby community through Munster and Cork On help you to get back on your feet. And it's a very strong community, very strong club game. Like that's why the AIL is so important as well. It's about rugby, but it's actually about the network, the people, and life, like, isn't it? Not to get too deep, but it is like it helps you through. You play for the club and you commit to the club, but the club commits back to you as well. So there's a lot in that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're touching the nutrition in a second, because obviously when you do go back into coaching, are you is it ever a case that you're kind of seeking that competitive edge to things? Because I know a lot of players speak about that they just kind of miss winning and losing sometimes. Does coaching kind of help that when you're going straight back into it with under 20s and then onto the senior side with Con?
To a degree, but like we won an AIL in 2019, and I remember thinking that's what I wanted, like to win something again, and it wasn't the same. Like it was a massive come down and a reality check. That's why I say you won't replace it. It wasn't the same. Like I wasn't in the middle of it. I know I wasn't in the middle of things as a player anyway. I'm not that kind of person, but I wanted to be as the coach. I wanted to let my hair down, and I remember thinking, this is their time, like, it's not mine at all. And you do get satisfaction from it, but it's not the same kind of satisfaction as letting the hair down as a player. But the competitive edge doesn't go, and to my detriment, I'm quite competitive. So like whether it's a kicking competition, I don't do as much of it since I've become the head coach in Con, because you need time to talk to players and all the rest of it, and I'd probably do a little bit less kicking than I'd like to do. But you find anyway at all to be competitive with people, like, so it does fill a bit of a gap, and it gives you something. But um in the best way possible, it's not the same. It's not supposed to be the same. I think the quicker you get to that realization, there's a bit of acceptance in that, that it's not going to be the same as you putting your boots on. But when I say it's not the same, it doesn't mean it's not as satisfying. Like I love seeing fellas do something that you've helped them with, or something that you can see them doing themselves. Like it doesn't even have to be your influence for it to be satisfying. It's just seeing the development of people is, like I said, it's a different thing altogether, but you get a lot of satisfaction from it too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to see as well. But you mentioned the nutrition side of things. You did your master's in nutrition. How does that come about? Was this something that was always like an interest and a passion, or how does that go? And for people who mightn't know, what does a job in that sector look like?
A job in that sector is fairly messy now. There's bits and pieces all over the place, but like I'm with Cork footballers the last 6 years, and I'm up in Tipperary hurling now just this year. But I'm working alongside Catherine Norton, who was my nutritionist or dietitian when I was playing in Munster, and she saw firsthand how insane I was about my own nutrition. So here we are, full circle again. But like, and I'm with the Cork ladies as well. But I'm self-employed. I deal with private clients and different bits and pieces around that, corporate talks, club talks, etc., etc. But like, it's a bit more higgledy piggledy, if that's a word. Now you can make it very streamlined too, but that's just the way I've gone about it. But yeah, I was a small player anyway, so I was always a bit more interested in my nutrition, having to bulk up and everything else. But I think as well from a younger age, like my mom in particular, and her dad, my granddad was um, quite health conscious, and small things, brown bread instead of white bread, when that wasn't as straightforward. It wasn't the main thing in the house, like, and there they were making changes. And then when I was a teenager, maybe my mom really got into that. She'd be quite health conscious, and brown rice instead of white rice, and plenty of good quality food at home. And my dad started cooking in as well a bit more, so that kind of fed into the whole thing. So like there was a lot of influence at home too. And I suppose the sporting side of me, that was the part that I was into as well, like performance and nutrition and everything else. So there's a whole load of reasons why, but I didn't really know, because when I was throwing your leaving cert and you're a sports person, you think you're going to do something in sport, and is it going to be physio or something else? Like, and I think I had that realization that sport isn't a career, like, and I was probably wrong to a degree, but like, get over yourself. You're not going to kick a ball forever and go into a business degree, like, and here I am heavily involved in sport again. So it came around a bit funnily, but yeah, nutrition was the one that, I became quite interested and obsessed with. So that's why I went on and did something that I enjoy, even though there are challenging parts to it.
Did it help when you were kind of doing your, I suppose they call it further education, to give it the formal term, that you kind of had that backdrop of having been in a pro environment where nutrition is so important?
Massively. Yeah, I think like being in a dressing room helps you to know how to deal with people that are in a dressing room and understand the dressing room kind of the ways around it, how people feel in certain situations. Not to say you get everything right, but you cop on a little bit quicker because you know how they feel. But I like having been a player and dealing with players, I'd like to think there's a bit of aligned thinking there, and also being a coach, you'd like to think like how people are feeling in different situations. So like when I'm dealing with the manager in Cork or whatever else, like you might get things wrong the odd time, but you'd know not to step on their toes, not to get too involved at certain times, and they do kind of complement each other quite a bit. But they're obviously different roles, but it does align. And like I'm dealing with a lot of multidisciplinary teams, but I'm different. I wear a different hat in some of them, so it's you do understand things a little bit differently, and maybe that's my USP to a degree. But like there's also a bit of a weakness in there that I'm probably trying to do too much, So there's a lot of different fingers and pies, but it definitely keeps me thinking, and it's I mean, there's like I've a brilliant child at home here. She's just absolutely active and wild, and she's brilliant. But trying to balance all that stuff is another challenge. And you can't just do what you want all the time. I could be out all day long if I never had to think about anything else or anyone else. But the day is not that long, and there's other people need you as well. So it definitely puts a bit of manners on you.
Yeah, I suppose. And just like you mentioned, you work with GA teams as well. When you kind of first got involved with them, I don't know which one was first now, to be specific. Did you kind of have to take a step back and realize you were dealing with different types of athletes than what you'd have been familiar with, or is it more similar to studies? Because I know, like, you think rugby players, you go to like lock forwards, props. You think GA players, your mind just goes to like a nippy corner forward, like, so they're very different body builds.
They are different, but I think I'd gone into like amateur rugby coaching before that, so I did understand the amateur player a bit better than what I would have done if I went straight in. Now you're talking about elite amateur players, like so, you nearly cross into professionalism at times, but they have a job in the daytime, and that was a big learning point for me that these people have to go to work first, like and I didn't have to go to work when I was training, but I think it was a bit of a cheat code for me as well in one sense because people thought I probably knew more than I did, or you do get a bit more respect, rightly or wrongly, and I think wrongly sometimes. Not that I didn't appreciate it, but you do, he played professional rugby or he was in that environment. Surely he knows. And I would have been asked my opinion on things outside of nutrition in certain environments too, which I would try to toe the line with. But it definitely is I'm very aware that even in my private practice, like some people might have come to me in the past because they think I understand the sport better. And it's not just about nutrition sometimes, but so we all have our selling points, and that's possibly one of mine.
I should ask, just completely tongue in cheek now in this, but you're involved with the Cork GA. When Ben O'Connor moved over to Munster Academy, was there any conversations being had? Were they looking in your direction?
No, not in my direction for that. I was definitely not a part of it. I'd like if he went to Cork right and not go to UCC, but no, he's Ben's from my home club, like in the Bars anyway. So I wouldn't have known Ben very well, but I would have. I definitely would have stayed out of it, and I definitely would have been asked the question, like but I wouldn't have had any influence at all in it. And I was just watching a fella who, like, I played with Darren Sweetenham, who went from hurling into rugby, and unfortunately, it's hard to compete when there's a professional life ahead of him and a career as a sports player, But I definitely understood it, and seeing Sweets go through the professional pathway as well, it's very hard to fight with that, when you're a GA team and he has to go to work and find a different career as well. But it's he's done really well. He's had a really good summer with Munster and appearances at Munster this year, and obviously he's with the under 20s at the moment. So we'll keep an eye on him, but I definitely won't be meddling.
Okay, fair enough. I had to ask just for this, just for the sake of throwing a chaos grenade in there. But just before we finish up, like you do regular podcasts with RTE and your regular columnist. Do you enjoy that side of things, kind of the punditry side? Because I know, like, obviously I'm doing it like at the moment with the Six Nations, but some people kind of go through their career hating the media, and some people love that side of things. So how are you finding it in recent years?
Again, it's something I fell into, but I quite like it. Like I really like having an opinion that you can put out there and feel some bit valued. People would say to me, "I read they might call it a blog," like when I try not to get insulted by that, and it's the national broadcaster. But no, it's people will say it to me every now and then, and obviously it is being read, and you can have a bit of a reach with something that you enjoy watching. Now there's more to it. Like I don't like to bluff or spoof, so like I'll put myself under pressure to watch a lot of rugby, which can be tough when you've got a few different irons in the fire, But I quite like it. I've done some commentary with schools games and Access Munster and TG Car at one stage. So like again, it's a really challenging thing for me. I wouldn't have thought I'd ever go into anything like that, but I just enjoyed it and kept going. So I like it, but definitely there can be a challenge to it, and you're in the public eye as well, which was never something that sat very well with me. Like you get a bit more used to it, but because I'm not very much in the public eye, but it's you have to understand that once you put an opinion out there, it's going to be scrutinized, like, and it has been in the past. And I don't always get on well with that either. Like you get better at dealing with that, and you think you've said nothing wrong, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I might have gotten it a small bit wrong, or I got it, I'm absolutely right here, and they're having a meltdown for no reason. Like, but it's gone into the public forum, and you don't control what happens after that. So there's a challenge in that, but I definitely enjoy it most of the time anyway.
A good tip is to stay out of the YouTube comment sections. I know they're the ones I usually like to watch the RTÉ podcast. I don't know why I'm a visual consumer, and just stay away because it can just get a little bit unhinged very, very easily. So that's a good tip.
Luckily, I didn't know that existed, but now I do. So that's going to be another chance.
I'd stay away. I'd definitely stay away. You could say that Ireland won by 10 and someone will argue, well, was it really a 10-point win, on merit and all that. So
Well, once you're not telling me that I'm on YouTube somewhere getting slated, I'll be all right about it.
oh, we all are. It's fine. Every single one of us. Like, I know you're often on with Bernard Jackman, and most people agree with Birch, but he's getting slated there as well. So
Oh, don't worry. There was a thread recently on Twitter or X, I should call it these days, but like we didn't. Yeah, we were just being truthful about this current situation, objective, I would say, as opposed to truthful. And yeah, there was a long there was a long thing going on, and luckily he started tackling it, and I just stayed away from it. But it's a rabbit hole. It's a deep, deep hole that you can get stuck into.
Absolutely. It's one thing that the players do better than the rest of us is that they just stay away from it half the time. They are
Unfortunately,
far
I think,
better off.
yeah, but in the media, you have to have a presence, you know. So for
Yeah.
Bertie, like, yeah, I'd imagine he was replying because, you know, that keeps you in the media. But unfortunately, the more you reply, the more you get. You know, I've definitely seen that myself as well. I had a tweet recently, and all of a sudden there was things coming from all angles, and I was at my sister-in-law's wedding, and I decided to just turn off the notifications because I couldn't be bothered dealing with it, like, you know. Which I don't do actually do often. I don't get enough to care. But it would get to you, so I turned off the notifications because they can be right and slate you, or they can be wrong and slate you. Neither of them feels good, so it's
Mm.
something I try to avoid that night anyway.
Yeah, probably. Especially at something like a wedding, there's no point getting worked up
Yeah, yeah,
while there's feel good music playing in the background and someone wants you to dance or drink. Like there's just no point for it, I suppose. But
yeah.
just on that to kind of wrap it up, do you see yourself kind of sticking with that in the future, or is it just kind of play it by ear? Because I know the podcasting stuff has kind of been more in the last kind of year or two than before. So how do you see it going? Do you think you'll stick with it?
I never know the answer to that. Like even coaching as well, I don't know the answer to it. I like doing it, I suppose, is the reason why I do it. And luckily enough, you know, it's part of my job. But I suppose you never know. Like it's a when you're doing a couple of different things, it's very hard to put everything into all of them. Obviously, like, you know, but to make it a full job takes a massive commitment, as you know. You know, so you have to be watching a lot of rugby, and if you want to have a real credible opinion, you do have to watch a lot of rugby, and that takes a soul at times. Like, so who knows? I like it, and I'll keep going while I enjoy it. And once there's opportunities there, I'll try and keep taking them. But you know, if it goes the other way, I just maybe just run with whatever happens, and my nutrition is still alive and all the rest of it. So who knows? But I do enjoy it, so I'll keep going for now.
It's the enjoyment that's the most important part for it anyway, because I know I would not be doing this if I didn't enjoy it. And it certainly helps when you're talking about like Munster last season and Ireland the last 2 years. It certainly helps. There's no point in shying away from that either. But once you're enjoying it, that is the main thing, especially when you're giving your opinion and there's it's the sport you enjoy. There's no point being, mad for 80 minutes and then being mad for another hour during the week either.
Oh, when I'd say Chloe looks at me half the time thinking he's watching another match, and I can half justify it sometimes, you know, saying I have to watch this or I need to keep an eye on this. But like I understand it's a game that I'd be watching anyway a lot of the time, like if I had free time, which isn't often. But yeah, so it's not too hard to get stuck into it when it's a sport that you like watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Johnny, we'll leave it at that for today. But thank you very much for coming on. It's been a really great listen. So thanks very much.
No problem at all. It's good to be here. Thanks.
And thanks at home to everyone for listening as well. Remember, this is just the latest edition of the series. The interviews will keep coming, but our fan-led Guinness Six Nations coverage is back as well ahead of the final 2 weeks of action. So thanks home to everyone for listening. If you do like what you see here, please just subscribe. And I will leave the links to some of Johnny's stuff down below if you want to praise his punditry and listen to the podcast. It is a great podcast, the RTÉ one, I should say. It's my weekly listen. But thanks very much to Johnny and to everyone at home. But for now, and until next time, take it easy.